Welcome to Set 4, Slides 1 through 32 of Daniel's 70th week, the 75 days following the 70th week, and the year of Jubilee. Again, I'm your host, Doug Krieger. This is a special presentation of the Tribulation Network in cooperation with End Time Pilgrim, Dr. Gavin Finley. His website is www.endtimepilgrim.org, and ours is www.the-tribulation-network.com. Now let's place our first Jubilee cycle of 49 years over at the start of that 70 weeks, 490-year timeline. And again, here we see the 49-year Jubilee cycle, and 70 times 7 equals 490, the 70 weeks of Daniel. Again, and immediately we notice something interesting. The number 490 is indeed a neat multiple of 49. 49-year Jubilee cycle. 70 times 7 equals 490, the 70 weeks of Daniel. And as we see, the multiplying factor here between the 490 years of the 70 weeks and the 49-year Jubilee is 10. Again, 490 divided by 49 equals 10. 70 times 7 equals 490. So if we lay out 10 of these 49-year Jubilee cycles, we notice that they add up to precisely 490 biblical years. 10 times 49 will equal 490. 10 sets of 49. Simple arithmetic here, 49 times 10 equals 490, which also equals 70 times 7. So here is Jubilee connection number 2. The 490 years of the 70 weeks of Daniel are made up of a neat whole number of 10 Jubilee cycles. Ten times 49 equals 490. The same again as 70 times 7 equals 490 of the 70 weeks of Daniel. And let's take note of this as well. The number 10 is associated with God's law upon this earth. The timeline of the 70 weeks prophecy contains an auspicious whole number of precisely 10 Jubilee cycles. 10 times 49 equals 490. 10 Jubilee cycles of 49 years each. Now we can quickly move on to Jubilee connection number 3. If the 70 weeks prophecy is made up of precisely 10 Jubilee cycles, then the 10th Jubilee must of necessity terminate with a Jubilee right at the end of the age. This would have to be a blockbuster Jubilee. So what does all this mean? If the 70 weeks prophecy is made up of precisely 10 Jubilee cycles, then the 10th Jubilee and the 70 weeks timeline must both of necessity terminate with an epic climactic Jubilee. Would this not have to be the epic, climactic, blockbuster Jubilee of Messiah? Would this not have to be that final, epic, climactic blockbuster Jubilee of Messiah? Well, let's take a closer look at the final 10th Jubilee cycle. Notice that there is a gap between the 69 weeks and the future 70th week. This comes directly from the biblical text, Daniel chapter 9 and verse 27. This gap is explained at length in our earlier videos on the 70 weeks of prophecy at www.endtimepilgrim.org. The 10th Jubilee of the 70 weeks. The gap between the 69 weeks and the future 70th week is a 2,000-year gap, which 69 weeks concluded at the time when Messiah was cut off. But there will be a 70th week yet future, the 70th seven of Daniel. As we have discovered, the 69 weeks ended in Passion Week on Nisan 10, Palm Sunday of 32 AD or 33 AD. On that day, Jesus, or Yeshua, made his one and only royal or political appearance, entering the holy city as Messiah the Prince. That is, until Messiah the Prince. Daniel 9:25. The 69 weeks began with the edict of Artaxerxes given to Nehemiah and ended with the first coming of Messiah on Palm Sunday. And there you have the beginnings, Nisan 2, March 15, 445 BC, through Nisan 10, April 9, 32 AD or 33 AD. 476 calendar years plus 25 days. 69 weeks, or 69 times 7, would equal 483 biblical years, times 360 would equal 173,880 days from the decree of Artaxerxes given to Nehemiah until Messiah the Prince. The gap, a hiatus for the gospel outreach to the Gentiles, has now gone on for almost 2 millennia. The gap period is not being counted for Jubilees, but that future 70th week, the final 7 years of this age, will be counted for the Jubilees. The 10th Jubilee of the 70 weeks. 69 weeks to Messiah's first coming. Now we wait the future 70th week of Daniel. There's a at least 2,000 year gap between the conclusion of the 69 weeks and the commencement of the 70 weeks. As we can see in some future year, that 10th Jubilee cycle and the future 70th week will both come to a grand climax at the same time, in the same fall harvest season. The Jubilee that follows must certainly be an epic Jubilee of biblical proportions. The 10th Jubilee of the 70 weeks. The epic Jubilee at the end of the future 70th week, the Jubilee of Messiah. The 77's prophecy brings us a wealth of information for timing and chronology. The first 69 weeks ended 2,000 years ago with the first coming of Messiah on Palm Sunday. At that time, he came to Jerusalem in his priestly ministry as the suffering servant. The 10th Jubilee of the 77s. This is the first coming of Messiah at the conclusion of the first 69 weeks. The 70th week is somewhere up there in our future. It will terminate with the second coming of Messiah in his kingdom office as King of Kings. The 10th Jubilee of the 77s will terminate with the second coming of Messiah as King of Kings. That 70th week of Daniel, those final 7 years, will wrap up the 10th Jubilee and finish up the timeline of the 70 weeks prophecy. Messiah will bring this present evil age to a just and merciful closure. Yes, the 10th Jubilee of the 77s, the Jubilee of Messiah. It will bring the 70 weeks to its final climactic conclusion, the second coming of Messiah as King of Kings. Again, this is Doug Krieger, your narrator for this special series, and this concludes our 4th in this series, and we now move on to our 5th in this series. Thank you for viewing and listening, and now moving on to number 5.